Scoring play? Or was that a touchdown play? That was Jerry Judy catch. That was not a touchdown play. Yeah. The Broncos did score a touchdown in the second quarter today. And that's the good news. There isn't much else that represents good news. Touchdown pass actually from Driscoll to Tim Patrick with 14 seconds left in the first half. That made the score at that point, Tampa Bay 23, Denver 10. That was the halftime score. Bucs led 10-0 at the quarter, 28-10 after 3. They are now in victory formation and about to close out a 28-10 win over the Broncos as the Bucs have moved the ball off an interception of Brett Rippon. Both Rippon and Jeff Driscoll, the starter, threw interceptions today, although under the circumstances, neither one played poorly. The Broncos have found a new low. The only basis as we open the Fan Football postgame here, and we'll be with you for the next hour, 303-713-1043 on the phones and on the RamosLaw.com text line. Sandy Clough with you. The only defense, really, of Vic Fangio, who is now 7-12 as head coach of the Broncos and has started 0-3 in consecutive seasons, something that has not happened to the Denver Broncos since the mid-1960s and the bad old days of the American Football League. At least from Denver's standpoint, the bad old days of the American Football League. And indeed, 28-10 is the final. The Bucs have won it. And Tampa Bay moves to 2-1, the Broncos to 0-3. There may be relief in sight, though, even though it is a short turnaround week and a travel week for Denver. They go to the Meadowlands to take on the New York Jets Thursday night, and the Jets may be worse than the Broncos, regardless of where the game is staged at this point. The Jets were beaten by the Colts today 36-7. And Adam Gase is also 0-3 this year with the Jets. Both Fangio and Gase are 7-12 as head coaches. They were coordinators with the Chicago Bears together back in 2015. Now they meet for the first time as head coaches in a Thursday night game that probably does not have the network folks terribly excited, either on Fox or on the NFL Network. But that will be the Thursday night matchup. We will be spared another Sunday encounter for at least a few weeks. 2 weeks from today, the Broncos will be in Foxborough to take on the seemingly much improved New England Patriots, even without Tom Brady. And Brady was fine today. Brady was Brady. And if this is Brady's last game against the Broncos, and it very well may be, almost certainly the last game he'll ever play in Denver, his career record now against the Broncos is 9-9, 8-6 in the regular season, only 1-3 in the playoffs. The Patriots knocked off the Broncos back in 2011. Tim Tebow's final game as Broncos quarterback. You may remember that. But the Broncos defeated New England in 2 AFC championship games, and the third defeat of New England, with Tom Brady at quarterback and Bill Belichick, of course, as the head coach, came in the divisional playoffs following the 2005 season and represented the first postseason loss of the Brady-Belichick or Belichick-Brady era in Foxborough. But those were days gone by. Hi there, Zach. How you doing? We are having a few glitches on the board today. Stuff coming up that shouldn't be coming up. But the Broncos had more than a few glitches on their way to this loss. We have phone lines open. Jump on board for your big picture, small picture, medium-sized picture outlook on this game. And again, the defense of Fangio had been, well, the Broncos haven't quit on him. And if they've lost close. But our friend Mark Schlereth, who was on the game today for Fox, said this during the week. And I'm not sure he said it on the air, but he certainly said it to me as we were crossing over between shows earlier last week. And he said, just because you lose close, that does not mean you are close, meaning close to being a winning football team, close to being a playoff contending football team. Losing close is what happens to most teams when they lose in the National Football League. Most games in the NFL are one-score games. 9-point game is technically, of course, a 2-score game. 10-point game is considered a blowout. 10 points or worse. Even though not every game decided by 9 points or more, 10 points or more, would really be considered a blowout. Not every game would be. But if you're looking at the percentage of one-score games that are played in the NFL, it's most games. Give you an idea today. The Broncos lose 28-10, but the Lions have beaten the Cardinals 26-23. That's a one-score game. Seattle's leading by 2 points with 4 minutes to go at home over Dallas. That's a one-score game. The Bears rallied with 20 in the fourth quarter, beat the Falcons 30-26, one-score game. Bills 35, Rams 32, one-score game. Browns by 2 touchdowns over Washington, 34-20, but I don't know if that was a blowout. The Browns were trailing in the fourth quarter in that game. Titans by 1 over the Vikings, 31-30, one-score game. Patriots 36-20 over the Raiders. 49ers 36-9 over the Giants. Bengals over the Eagles. Actually, the Bengals and the Eagles tied 23-23. And the Steelers, I believe that would be a 7th game, 28-21 over the Texans. Colts beat the Jets 36-7. Panthers over the Chargers 21-16, one-score game, so that's 8. You get the idea. More than 50% of the games typically in any NFL week over any NFL season. Most of the games are one-score games, and the Broncos lost by 18 points today, and the game was not nearly as close as that score might indicate. So once you eliminate that as a defense for Fangio, and I'm not saying the team quit on him today. I'm saying they were so desperately outclassed and frankly outcoached. I mean, how does Shaq Barrett get his first sack of the season? Well, that is what I call, and people who've been Bronco fans for a time will understand this reference, that was a Mike Kroll sack. You may remember Mike Kroll if you've been following the Broncos for many, many years. He played here, was drafted here out of Nebraska, instead of Alfred Williams out of Colorado, by the way, at the time, which raised a few hackles. But Mike Kroll had an excellent first season as a Denver Bronco. And Wade Phillips at the time was the Bronco defensive coordinator. And he did a great job with Kroll as a rookie in setting him up in situations that would allow for him to rush the passer without being impeded by a pass blocker. And this is 1991. And Kroll had 10 sacks that year. In 1992, people paid a little more attention to Michael Kroll, and Mike Kroll ended up with 5 sacks in 1992. And he had 5 sacks again in 1993. And after that, that was all that people heard from Mike Kroll as a pass rusher here in Denver. Shaq Barrett's first sack of the year came about 9 minutes into the second quarter. He was unblocked. Now, I don't know about you, but considering the fact that this was the number one sack artist in the NFL last year with 19 and a half sacks, though he didn't have any sacks in the first 2 weeks, why on earth would any formation, any configuration that you might imagine leave Shaq Barrett unblocked? Now, I know the Bronco offensive line isn't very good, and Shaq Barrett could beat Elijah Wilkins with two hands tied behind his back. He could beat Elijah Wilkinson with two hands tied behind his back. But not to block him at all? What kind of formation would call for Shaq Barrett to come in untouched to sack quarterback Jeff Driscoll? We have the play, and I believe it's courtesy of Fox Sports, if I'm not mistaken. Let's listen to this play just to give you a sense of Shaq Barrett on his first sack of the year. It would not be Shaq Barrett's last big play of this game, of course, but it was his first sack of the season. Now, Elijah Wilkinson, in the first 2 weeks of the season, gave up 4 sacks. No lineman in the National Football League gave up as many as 4 sacks in the first 2 weeks. Nobody else. Elijah Wilkinson has given up more sacks than any other offensive lineman in the NFL. But you could not blame that sack on Wilkinson or Bowles or Noah Fant or Jake Butt or Melvin Gordon for not picking him up. He was not touched on his way to the quarterback. They ran a blitz off the corner earlier in the game, quite similar to the safety blitz by Edmonds last week that cinched the game on 4th and 2 from inside the Pittsburgh 20-yard line. And nobody blocked him. Now, the Broncos gave up a bunch of sacks today when they were attempting to block people. They have enough trouble when they're trying to block people. When they don't have a formation set up that accounts for the leading pass rusher last year in the National Football League, Shaq Barrett, with 19 and a half sacks a year ago, and knowing he's loaded for bear, the first order of business in the offensive game plan this week had to be to identify Shaq Barrett in any and all passing situations and make sure that he is blocked. That is an example of Bronco coaching incompetence, and it isn't the first. It won't be the last that we see in 2020. It isn't the first time in more than 3.5 years, a period in which Denver now has a record of 20-37, that we have seen coaching incompetence. But the big picture outlook on this team at this point calls for a more thorough examination of what is wrong. And I understand the Broncos are playing without some key players right now. But a number of teams are playing without key players. And we will talk more about that momentarily, but we've got Vic Fangio speaking from the Bronco locker room right now. All right, apparently more glitches. We have lost Vic Fangio. We'll pick up as best we can the entire conversation at some point. Just to look at the general numbers today, and guys, we need to get the phones answered if we could, please. Total yardage for the game, Tampa Bay 353 yards and Denver 226 yards. Time of possession favored Tampa 33:02 to 26:58. The Broncos turned the ball over twice. Once again, the Broncos were not able to take the ball away, not even one time, via interception or fumble recovery from the Buccaneers on this Sunday afternoon, this 27th day of September 2020. And the Broncos for the game had a grand total of 13 first downs. Tampa Bay finished with 17 first downs. And to put it mildly, the Broncos were never in this game. And, of course, you couldn't say that about the first two games, even though they lost both games. So it fortifies, in my opinion, Brother Schlereth's point that losing close does not mean you are close to winning. And the Broncos demonstrated today that they are not close to winning. The two harried quarterbacks combined today for Denver, 25 of 39, 184 yards, less than 6 yards per pass attempt, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. The Bucs sacked Driscoll and Rippon 6 times for 45 yards and losses, and the Bronco passer rating collectively for the day was 67.1. On the other hand, Tom Brady, who basically was untouched, although he was sacked a couple of times. Shelby Harris got to him. Tom Brady, 25 of 38, 297 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, sacked twice, and a rating of 115.8. The Broncos did nothing on the ground today. They did very little through the air. Their leading receivers were Judy and Fant. Both caught 5 passes. For Tampa, Gronkowski was the game's leading pass receiver in terms of catches with 6. Where do you go from here? Maybe you have a walkover game against the Jets on Thursday night, but then it's back to playing real football teams again. And after that, the Broncos have New England, a Miami team that, even though it isn't expected to contend for a playoff spot this year, isn't bad. And, yeah, the game's in Denver, but remember, even with 5,500 fans, there is no home field advantage for the Broncos. There's no difference between playing here and playing on the road for this team as currently constituted. Then you get to the Chiefs. The Falcons blow a lot of big leads, but the Broncos don't seem to have the firepower to come back in any game. Then it's the Raiders, Chargers, Saints, Chiefs again, Panthers, Bills, Chargers, and Raiders. Good luck finding wins in there. And for those who think that the Broncos have the inside track for Trevor Lawrence, number 1 pick in the draft, they haven't looked at the Jets yet this year. And believe me, every team in the NFL that's winless right now, and there are a few of them, of course, every team in the NFL is thinking about Trevor Lawrence, including the Minnesota Vikings, who haven't won a game yet either. This Denver Sports Station, Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan. Ty will get to you on the Fan Football postgame next. The sentiment expressed, and I'm sure we'll get this from the callers, from Ty and from Robert, who we'll be getting to in just a moment. This from the 520. When are people going to realize that Fangio isn't a good head coach? His best defenses have performed because he had all-pro players, not because of his play calling. There is a reason he has never been a head coach in the NFL, and that last line is an increasingly common sentiment around Broncos country. We will get to Vic Fangio momentarily, but first we'll go to Ty. You're on Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan Football Postgame with Sandy Clough. Hello.
Hey, Sandy. I'll ask this, and then I'll get off the line. So my thing is I've been a huge Broncos supporter for a long time, and I totally backed John Elway for the first, till the last couple of years. I mean, we all thought that Fangio was going to be like the second coming and lead us out of the darkness. Now, then, with that being said, with everything that's happening with this team, and it just looks like a dumpster fire as is 2020, should we just – I'm talking from ownership all the way down to –
There is no ownership. That's the problem. You've hit on the key problem. There is no ownership. In most organizations, there would be accountability, but there can only be accountability at the top if there is ownership. Now, bad owners do exist in the NFL, and I suppose we can have a debate as to which is worse, no owner or a bad owner. Daniel Snyder, for example. Is it better to have no owner than it is to have a bad owner? Maybe, but you have no accountability at the top with no owner. So it's never going to go well with no owner. That's a given. That's a given. Washington's been bad under Daniel Snyder, but occasionally they've had decent teams. Even under Jay Gruden, they had some decent teams that qualified for the playoffs. I believe they even won the NFC East one year. This team will not win anything. This team is one of the worst 5 teams in the National Football League. And by the way, over the last 57 games, that's 3.5 games plus the game today. 3.5 years plus the game today. They have not won more games than the Washington Redskins have won, or the Washington Football Team, as it is now called. They have not. So if you think of the Broncos in the last 57 games, you think of the Washington Football Team in the last 57 games. The records are the same. There's no difference. So I guess to answer the question, which is worse, it doesn't matter. The records are the same. Washington's last 57 games, 20-37. Denver's last 57 games with no owner, 20-37. It's bad either way. But you do not need a great owner. You just need an owner who holds people accountable. The Broncos did happen to have a great owner in Pat Bowlen. And we know how much the Broncos miss Pat Bowlen. You can talk about Peyton Manning retiring. You can talk about all kinds of things. And, yes, teams in the short run that have already been built and have been winning, yes, they can survive without an owner in the short term. Pat Bowlen was not an active owner when the Broncos won the Super Bowl 5 years ago. But over the long haul, when people make mistakes, and they make them repeatedly, they make them over and over and over again, when you don't have an owner, there's no one to hold those people accountable. And people get contracts that make them unfireable. The terms of John Elway's contract make him virtually unfireable. Now, John Elway, out of a sense of pride, may walk away at the end of this season if it's bad enough. I thought that might happen last year, but the Broncos finished 4-1, and everybody got excited and started looking at the more recent drafts and the performance of Drew Lock, a second-round pick, and the performance of Cortland Sutton last year as a second-round pick. Of course, both are now injured. Sutton is out for the year, and now you begin to look at these drafts, and in 18, 19, and 20, they've been okay. They've been reasonably solid drafts, but now you're beginning to see the true effects of bad drafting for a 5-year period that preceded 2018. The 5 drafts from 2013 through 17. And as far as Vic Fangio is concerned, I guess you could let him go. You could even find grounds to let him go right now. But that would mean a 5th coach over a period of 7 years, even if you promoted, let's say Mike Munchak or Pat Shurmur. Both have had head coaching experience. The offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur, and the offensive line coach, Mike Munchak. I don't believe that Vic Fangio is comfortable being a head coach. He's been a defensive coordinator for the better part of 35 years, 33 years to be exact. Spent virtually all that time calling defensive signals from the press box. He seems kind of the polar opposite of Vance Joseph, who was kind of a manic figure on the sidelines, very anxious, running around, seeming to be completely confused. Vic Fangio, although we didn't see it today, we saw him with a face shield today. That was different. We did not see the Fangio pose, at least not on camera today, but that has become the image for Vic Fangio, the Fangio pose, hands on both knees, staring at the ground as his team bumbles and stumbles around, offensively, defensively, and again today on special teams. There is no silver lining here. The Broncos are a bad organization. They are a bad offensive team. They are probably, at best, an average defensive team. They are bad on special teams once again. Another snafu with the punter today. Punt getting blocked. The Broncos took a safety on that basis. They were sacked for a safety today. Shaq Barrett sacked Driscoll for a safety to make it 25-10 in the third quarter. Not that the game was in doubt at that point. But under ordinary circumstances, sure, a house cleaning would be in order, and the Broncos did those things all the time in the 1960s. Vic Fangio is not the worst head coach the Broncos have ever had. There are a slew of coaches you can choose from over the course of the 1960s. And by the way, Lou Saban is not one of those coaches. Lou Saban won 2 championships in the American Football League. Lou Saban was a good coach. And Lou Saban brought the Broncos some level of organization. So much so that when John Ralston came in, even though John wasn't a particularly good coach, wasn't as good a coach as Lou Saban, he was an excellent judge of talent, and he built a talent base because the organization had been set up well. And John Ralston is a much better coach than Vic Fangio is. And John Ralston wasn't really a very good football coach, but he was a terrific general manager. In fact, in terms of talent evaluation, no one in the history of the franchise has been any better at identifying and securing talent than John Ralston was during his time here over 67 games in the 1970s. And I say John wasn't a very good coach, but his teams had a combined record of 34, 33, and 1. That looks pretty good right now, doesn't it? 500 football. Remember what that felt like? Have to go back 4 years. And even in 2016, the Broncos lost 4 of their last 6 games after starting 7-3. Let's go to Robert quickly. You're on Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan Football Postgame with Sandy Clough. Hello.
Yes, sir. I think you covered most everything. I just wanted to add, I think that Manning kind of camouflaged an incomplete will that Pat Bowlen should have been more specific on what his expectations, real specific on what reasonably winning is. And I think Manning kind of helped Ellis and Elway kind of extend too long of it really was just Manning that did it for him.
Yeah, but the last year Peyton wasn't really all that effective. Certainly not during the regular season. During the playoffs, he cut out the interceptions, as we know. But the Broncos didn't win with offense in 2015. They won with defense. They couldn't keep everybody on defense, but it looks as if they made some questionable decisions, more bad decisions than good decisions. They weren't all bad. You can't sign everybody. You can't sign Malik Jackson if you want Derek Wolfe too. Maybe you can't re-sign Danny Trevathan when you're paying Vaughn Miller a truckload of money. Chris Harris signs at a discount. You're not in a position to pay other people, having signed Harris and Wolfe, even though they signed below market value. You end up effectively choosing Wolfe over Jackson. You make forays into free agency for right tackle after right tackle after right tackle after right tackle, and you're still stuck with the worst right tackle who is starting now in the NFL, in Elijah Wilkinson. So since Peyton's retirement, they have made plenty of mistakes, and the drafting mistakes that they made in 13 and 14 and 15 get overlooked because they were winning in those seasons, and people have trouble believing that you could have a bad draft and during the same year go to the Super Bowl or win 12 games or go to the Super Bowl and win it. That's what happened in 13, 14, and 15. It didn't mean the drafts were any good, though, and you began to pay the price in 16, 17, 18, 19, and now it continues into 2020. But you're right that Peyton Manning, at his best, camouflaged weaknesses. For example, in 2013, although they had a lot of injuries too, the Broncos on defense weren't very good. They went to the Super Bowl largely on the backs of an offense that scored 606 points that year. The Broncos gave up 400 points that year. Good luck finding a Super Bowl team, much less a Super Bowl champion, that gives up 400 points in a season. I believe there's been one. That was the New York Giants back in 2011, and that was strictly due to injuries. When the Giants had a healthy defense in the playoffs in 2011, they were gangbusters. If you go back and look at their record in playoff games in 2011, as well as Eli Manning played, it was the defense that carried the Giants. So you're correct in saying that Manning camouflaged some weaknesses up until 2015. The Broncos got carried away in 2015 with the notion that, one, they could win just with a great defense, and two, the offense could not be any worse than it was in 2015. And as recently as a year ago, Troy Aikman on national television described Denver's offense as the worst offense he had ever seen in his life. I think that offense might be better than this one, believe it or not. We have another 30 minutes left. We have lines open on the phones at 303-713-1043 as the Fan Football postgame continues. We will, when we come back, have our Defensive Player of the Game, which we will be awarding by process of elimination to the only Bronco defensive standout today. And you can probably guess, if you watched any of the game, the identity of that man. We'll identify him officially next. Shelby Harris is, in fact, as some of you have surmised, our defensive player of the game. Played with a lot of heart today. Sacked the quarterback, knocked down a pass or two. Terrific game for Shelby Harris. You know whose name we have not heard mentioned defensively since opening night? You get a few mentions on opening night because he blocked a few passes. Jarrell Casey. Haven't heard his name last 2 weeks. And for those recommending tanking for Trevor, the Broncos don't have to tank in order to lose football games. And unfortunately, as bad as the Broncos are, they are not the worst team in the National Football League. There might even be a couple of teams who are worse. I can think of the Jets and the Giants, just off the top of my head, as two teams who have actually won fewer games in the last 3.5+ years than the Broncos have. Those two would come to mind. The Broncos, by the way, over the last 57 games, have won fewer games than the Raiders have won. They have won fewer games than the Dolphins have won, believe it or not. They have won fewer games than the Jacksonville Jaguars have won. They have won fewer games than the Arizona Cardinals have won. They have won fewer games, or no more games, than the Washington football team has won. They have won fewer games than the team they lost to today, which until Brady came aboard, and I would say maybe apart from last year, which was Bruce Arians' first year as the head coach, a woeful football team. The Tampa Bay Bucks have won 3 more games in the last 57 games than the Broncos have won. And the Detroit Lions, who, by the way, did win today, have won more games than the Broncos have won over the last 3.5 years. Those are just some of the franchises, and looking at some of those franchises, that's impossible. Broncos haven't been that bad, have they? Oh, yeah. The Broncos have outclassed the Cleveland Browns, at least for now. The New York Giants, the Bengals, at least for now. And I know the Bengals haven't won, but I think they've got the right quarterback if they can keep him healthy. And, of course, the Jets are the other team. So those are the 4 teams who have won fewer games than the Broncos have won over the last 3.5 years. The Giants, the Jets, the Bengals, and the Browns. Congratulations. You've outperformed 4 other National Football League teams over the last 57 games. That is not a small sample size. And you know what? As bad as the Giants are, I think Daniel Jones is a decent quarterback prospect. And who knows? Drew Lock may be the same for Denver, but Drew Lock's been hurt in each of his first 2 years in the NFL trying to extend plays. Once in the preseason and once in Pittsburgh last week. And trying to extend plays behind this offensive line is guaranteed to get you injured if you're a quarterback. You may get hurt anyway. Joe Flacco got hurt last year. Not that he was playing very well, but Joe Flacco got hurt last year. Drew Lock got hurt in the preseason. So the only starting quarterback who didn't get hurt last year for Denver was Brandon Allen. We saw 2 more quarterbacks today, and you know something? It's impossible to say because the line is so bad and the surrounding talent is either green or overrated. And by green, I mean inexperienced. So it's hard to tell. But I think Brett Rippon understands this offense as well as any of the Bronco quarterbacks do, and certainly a lot better than Blake Bortles would understand this offense after spending exactly 2 days in the building before today. Maybe it's been 3. 2 or 3 days in the building, whatever it has been. A local columnist suggested, perhaps facetiously, that Blake Bortles get the start so somebody can beat up on him instead of ripping. And once again today, Jeff Driscoll, who took a beating last week. I think he took 4 sacks last week, and he sacked, 5 or 6 more times today. I guess 5 times today by the end of the contest, when he was mercifully pulled from the game early in the fourth quarter. We have several lines open at 303-713-1043. When we come back, we will hear from Vic Fangio, minus the technical problems, and we will hear from Jeff Driscoll as the Broncos are beaten by the Tampa Bay Bucks this afternoon at Empower Field at Mile High, 28-10. This is the Fan Football Postgame on Denver Sports Station, Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan. Now that highlight courtesy of Fox Sports, as the previous Shelby Harris highlight was. Shelby, our defensive player of the game, on a day in which the Broncos were beaten by the Buccaneers 28-10. And listen, I think it's tough for the leading team to play in games like these because you so obviously are outclassing the opposition that you get sloppy. And I said the same thing last week about Pittsburgh and even about Tennessee with all of the missed kicks in the opener. But Tampa didn't play all that good a game. I'm counting penalties on 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 individual players from Tampa during the course of the game. Alex Kappa, the right guard, did something today that I have never seen. At least I've never seen it called in any football game. He was called for holding 2 people on the same play. Yes, the officials said we have 2 calls. One is holding on number 65. I believe that's his number. Yeah. That is declined. Accepted is holding on number 65. He held 2 guys on one play. Bruce Arians at halftime expressed to Lindsey Zarniak more or less complete disgust with the fact that his defense took the last 4 minutes of the first half off and didn't bother covering anybody or tackling anybody. That's how the Broncos got their touchdown. Otherwise, it could have been worse than 28-10. Here's Vic Fangio following the game. This one, not a loss that could be explained away as just one of those tough losses in a close game. All right, that was Vic Fangio today, and we'll quickly recap some of the individual statistics as the Bucs win it 28-10 out at the stadium. We already gave you the quarterback numbers. Driscoll, 17 of 30, 176 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was sacked 5 times for 45 yards and losses. Passer rating of 71.0. Rippon, 8 of 9 for 53 yards, an interception, a sack, and a 51.6 rating. The Broncos as a team had a 67.1 passer rating between Driscoll and Rippon. Brady, 25 of 38, 297, 7.8 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, sacked twice, 115.8 passer rating. For the Broncos on the ground, Gordon, 8 for 26, Driscoll, 3 for 14, Freeman, 2 for 4, and Hamler, 1 for a -2, 14 carries, 42 yards. Tampa Bay, Jones, 13 for 53. Fournette, 7 for 15. Brady, 5 for no yards. Denver in the passing game got 5 catches for 55 yards from Judy. Fant, 5 for 46. Patrick, 4 for 43 and a touchdown. Freeman, 2 for 31. Hamler, 3 for 30. Gordon, 4 for 12. Spencer, 1 for 7. And Butt, 1 for 5. Cushenberry recovered a fumble today. That was the fumble from Rippon. The Broncos threw 2 picks, had 2 turnovers, and again today, no takeaways for the Broncos. Brady officially fumbled once, but that fumble was recovered by Fournette. And for Tampa Bay, big return day for Shaq Barrett. 6 tackles, 5 of them solo, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for losses, and 2 quarterback hits. One of the sacks resulted in 2 points and a safety for Tampa Bay. Winfield Jr. had a sack. Whitehead had a sack. Villa had a sack, and Pierre-Paul had a sack for Tampa. The 2 Broncos sacks, of course, came from our defensive player of the game, Shelby Harris. The New Orleans Saints are set to take on the Green Bay Packers in New Orleans. It's about a minute and a half in. No scoring as of yet. We will take you to that game next. Thanks for listening to the Fan Football Postgame. I'll see you alongside Orlando Franklin tomorrow morning at 9 on Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan.
Joined the 91 Bills as the only teams in history with 85-plus points and 1,000-plus yards in their first 2 games of the season. That's the fact of the game, sponsored by Dell Small Business. Here's another fact. When you talk to a Dell Technologies advisor, they're focused on you, ready to offer tailored solutions powered by the Intel vPro platform to keep your small business ready for what's next. Call the Dell Technologies advisor at 877-ASK-DELL. Kick is in the air from 2 yards deep. It's being returned by Deontay Harrison. He fumbled it, but he's picked up by his teammate coming over to grab it. J.T. Gray was Johnny on the spot, so New Orleans will keep the football. But Deontay Harris, he was a Pro Bowler last year as a returner, but almost lost that one.
He did lose it. Lucky for him, his teammate jumped on it. And luckily for the Green Bay Packers, they got their hand into the ball because there was a gaping hole in the middle of that return for the New Orleans Saints.
Heads up play, though, by J.T. Gray to jump on it at the 23-yard line on the left hash. So 3-0 Green Bay. New Orleans with the football, their second drive. They went 3 and out the first go-around. 7:23 left in the first. Out of the gun, Breeze is going to turn and hand it to Latavius Murray. He's got some space on the left side. A nice 10-yard gain, bowling his way into the chest of Kevin King and a couple others to pick up the first down.
Yeah, 6'3", 230 pounds, and it says 230 here. That means it's more like 235, 240. Big physical back. He has really good feet and balance for his size.
So he's getting some looks early. I mentioned coming into the game, 18 rushes, 62 yards for Murray. But a couple of carries, and now Alvin Kamara replaces him in the backfield, standing to the left of Breeze, who's in the gun. And Breeze gives this one to Kamara. So a 1-2 punch. Kamara with some room. Left side 50. Green grass ahead of him. 40, 30. One man to beat. He will not do that. He is tripped up by Jair Alexander inside the 20-yard line. Alvin Kamara with a 49-yard scamper to set up New Orleans.
An easy dive play just to the left-hand side, and Amos, the safety for the Green Bay Packers, comes up to make the tackle. He slips, and as soon as he slips, Alvin Kamara just takes off for the runnings for the New Orleans Saints.
Boy, he can move, and we talked about his extension, 5 years, $75 million, and so far this year he's living up to that money. Football on the 18-yard line. First play tonight for New Orleans in Green Bay territory as we hit the 6-minute mark of the opening quarter. Offset I formation, Breeze under center. Turns, hands, it's Murray. Murray slipping through one tackle, backing his way. Tough running all the way to the 11-yard line for a 7-yard pickup. But what a 1-2 punch in this first quarter, Murray and Kamara.
And I think we know the game plan for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah.
They're going to run the football right between the tackles against this Kenny Clark-less football team, and right now it's working.
Drew Brees, just the one